Come with me as I visit pawn shops in my area for the whole week, 5 days in a row, to see if I can find anything or not. So let's go ahead and get started. It is day one of the full week of game hunting at pawn shops in my area. I just pulled up to the Cash America pawn shop. You can see it here behind me. So let's go ahead and head in there and see if we can find anything good. So I headed into this Cash America pawn shop in hopes of finding something good. Made my way in the door, and right off the bat, I checked out the glass case right to the right of the door that had a bunch of MetaQuest 3 consoles and 3S's here. These are VR headsets, as well as the Elgato Stream Deck XL there. It was a little too expensive, and right next to that was this NBA Jam Arcade 1-Up. They had $500 for this, which was just way too much. Then I made my way over to the consoles and the video games here, and I looked around for a little bit, and they had moved everything around since the last time I had been in here, so I kind of was checking that out. Then I spotted a few Switch games and a few Xbox and PS4 games, so I asked them to bring them out and show them to me because I couldn't see. But unfortunately, these were not even worth picking up, and the prices on the Switch games were a little too expensive, so I asked if they would do less, but they had just put them out, so they couldn't. So unfortunately, day one at the Cash America Pawn did not turn out well, but I do plan on coming back here later on in the week, so hopefully we can find something there. But day one, we struck out, so let's go ahead and see what day two has for us. I'm parked outside this place called Urban Pawn. They have a decent selection, and their prices are actually pretty good, so hopefully we can find something worth picking up, so let's head into there. So I got out of my car and made my way into this Urban Pawn shop. This is like a small mom and pop pawn shop, and right away when I walked up towards the front, I noticed they had a bunch of games. Another MetaQuest or Oculus actually there, and then you could see some Xbox One games, some PS4 games, some DS games here, and a few consoles down below. And then over here to the left was more games like Xbox 360 and PS2, and a few consoles there. Their prices aren't too bad, honestly. On the counter, they have like a glass sheet where they put like a bunch of the cartridge-based games like Game Boy games, Game Boy Advance games. They have Super Nintendo games. Over here, they have NES games and other random stuff here, which is pretty interesting. So I kind of looked around there for a little bit, and then I ended up actually finding some stuff that was well worth it. Now, before I tell you what I ended up getting, I want to say I only paid $13 for all of this. That's with tax included. So this stop ended up being really cheap, and I found some decent stuff here, which was pretty good. Starting off, I found this Game Boy Advance game called Virtual Kasparov, which is just a virtual chess game, but for the price that they listed, it was pretty awesome. You could see right there how much it's actually worth. And then I was kind of looking at the Game Boy games, and that's when I ended up grabbing Toy Story 2 for the Game Boy, and then also Olympic Summer Games. I absolutely love the Summer Games or the Olympic Games in general. So when I saw this for the Game Boy, I knew I didn't have it, so I wanted to play it. So I ended up grabbing both of those, and that's how much both of these are currently going for on price starting. And then while I was grabbing those, he said, "Hey, do you want to grab that Stuart Little game?" And I was like, sure, why not? So I got Stuart Little, The Journey Home for the Game Boy Color. That's how much it's worth. Not much, but he basically threw this in for free. And then last but not least, I got this PS Vita game, The Wolf Among Us, a Telltale series game. Now, anytime I can find complete in-box Vita games for a good price, I'm going to pick them up. I think I might actually already have this one. I'll have to look, but I'm not 100% sure. But that's actually how much this is going for. So overall, you could tell. Ended up buying 5 games here for $13. Pretty much $2, let's say $3 each on every single one of these was definitely well worth it, and I'm glad we stopped. I just pulled up in front of this Easy Pawn, and I haven't been to this one in a long while, So let's go ahead and head in and see if we can find anything. The last time I was here, they had a bunch of stuff, but everything wasn't worth picking up. So hopefully we can find something today. So then I made my way into this easy pawn, like I said, that hadn't had anything in a while, and today was no different. Unfortunately, I made my way in there, looked at the kind of little controllers and everything here in this glass case. Behind the register, they had a bunch of consoles, but nothing really worth looking at. And then I ended up finding this Rock Band drum set. They wanted what I would think is way too much. So I didn't, unfortunately, find anything here. And there wasn't really much to video. Where the cashier is right in front of all the consoles. And so I wasn't able to film that, but it was like PlayStation 5s, PlayStation 4s, Xbox Ones, and Xbox Series X's. I found 2 Switch Lites there, but they were like $230, which is just way too much for a Switch Lite. So even though I've been into this place before and found stuff, it's really, really, really hit or miss. So I don't go here very often, but I do still see game stuff there, so I might need to try to go there more regularly. But enough about that. Day 3, we struck out, which is okay, but hopefully it gets better. It is day 4, and we are back in front of the Cash America pawn shop here. The first time we didn't really find anything that was worth it. Hopefully we can find something there, so let's head in and see if we can find anything. So then I made my way back to that Cash America pawn that we first started off on day 1. And I made my way back to the consoles, and they actually still had a bunch. I could see those Xbox One games are still there, but unfortunately there wasn't anything new here, which kind of makes sense. This was only like 4 days later, but honestly, I kind of like to stop at this pawn shop once a week because I feel like if I go any more than that, it's just not really worth it, and this goes to prove that point. Now, usually, if I wasn't working on this video, I wouldn't have gone again, but I was hoping maybe we would catch something that they had just posted or just put on the shelf floor or something like that. But unfortunately, as you can see, pretty much just the consoles back there. Again, in that glass case at the front, everything was basically still the same, and that NBA Jam was still there for $500, so I didn't even waste my time filming it. But kind of they moved things around back towards the consoles where they had a ton of PS5s and some Xboxes and not really anything else, unfortunately. But that's kind of how it is. But we've got one more day, and I really hope we can make up for it. It is day 5 of game hunting at pawn shops. I'm pulled up here in front of an easy pawn shop. So let's go ahead and head in and see if we can find any games that are worth picking up. So I made my way into this easy pawn, which actually sometimes does really well. I found some crazy Switch stuff, and I saw they had a ton of consoles here, and that is when I asked to see this PlayStation Vita. For some reason, all of their games weren't out, which was kind of weird, but this PS Vita was priced pretty well, and so when I saw it, I thought, okay, let's do that. And I walked out with this thing. It was a little interesting because this case on this is kind of wild, but for what it is, I was definitely surprised. I unfortunately had to wait around for like 20 minutes to get this thing to charge because it looked like it hadn't been. But one thing I noticed, other than this crazy case, is I opened up this game card slot, and that's when I noticed something interesting, being a mod for the PlayStation Vita game cartridge. This is supposed to be where the game is, and this is an SD card. So this is kind of interesting to me, and definitely well worth it. So after I waited and waited, this thing finally turned on. Unfortunately, they didn't have the proper charger for it, so it didn't come with a charger, but I did end up getting this for $100, and this was definitely well worth it for what that kind of SD card does for this thing. It makes it weird, but definitely awesome. But before we talk about that, we got to talk about this weird case, which has this magnetic triggers for the back that adds extra triggers instead of having to like touch the back screen, which I think is kind of interesting and kind of cool. But then it adds a little R2 and R1 buttons, as well as little knobs for your hands, which makes the Vita way more comfortable. But once we boot this thing up, I think you probably already might know what this actually is, but if this thing will start up, I'll show you, because this definitely caught my eye and is the reason why I actually ended up buying this PS Vita, because $100 is not a bad deal. It's not crazy. But when I saw that this was the way it was, I knew I just had to grab this, because this is like the way to end up this video, and definitely makes going to pawn shops this week, every day, 5 days in a row, definitely worth grabbing. So as you can see, game hunting at pawn shops can be very hit or miss. There could be some days where you walk in and you find a wild PS Vita for $100, and then for the next week you could walk into a bunch of pawn shops and not find anything at all. But this week we ended up finding some good stuff. Now I know there was a few days where I didn't, and I wanted to still show you that you still can go out there and game hunt, and you might not find stuff, but you might also find stuff. So I wanted to leave those in and not show that I got something wild every day, because that's just not the truth, and that's not how this goes. So I only had 2 days where I walked into a pawn shop and actually found some good stuff, starting off with that Urban Pawn where I found a few Game Boy games and then a PS Vita game. But the craziest part is, not only did I find a PS Vita game this week, I found a PS Vita at another pawn shop. So it's crazy to me to see that you can still find PS Vita stuff out in the wild and actually get it for good deals. But enough about that. What did you think about this video? I know I said this was a full week. It was 5 days. It's close enough. I went every day during my lunch period, so forgive me there that it's not 7 days, but it is what it is. I had a ton of fun game hunting, and I found some good stuff. So comment down below and let me know what you think about pawn shops and what I ended up getting. But enough about that. I gotta get out of here, so check that video out if you haven't already. But I'm really intrigued to see how this modded PS Vita works. I haven't really messed with it that much, so I'm definitely excited about that. But I gotta get out of here and go test that thing out. So if you haven't seen that video out, you gotta check it out.